As the 2023 NBA season continues to get closer and closer, the identities of each team are starting to come together, and we should be able to get a general feel for where each team stands and how they stack up against each other. Obviously, we don't know exactly how good everyone is until the games actually start getting played, but based on how each squad is made up, we can place certain expectations on each team for the coming year, and this is where the topic of today's video comes in. Today, we'll be discussing 4 NBA teams in particular that have a pretty good chance of ending up blowing things up completely and rerouting their focus towards a rebuild at some point in the next year. These are teams who at the moment are gunning for the playoffs, but if or when they fall short, they could come to the realization that the only way forward is by taking a step back. Before we start though, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as all support is very much appreciated. Now with that being said, let's begin. The first team we'll be discussing today that I believe is a likely candidate to blow it up this year is the Washington Wizards. The Wizards have dug themselves a hole, and the only way out is if Bradley Beal emerges as a superstar talent, because they just paid him like one, giving him a massive $200 million contract with a no-trade clause, so he's their franchise guy. The issue with this is the fact that Beal is a borderline top 20 player in the league right now, and in order to compete at the highest level, you probably need a legitimate superstar. The Wizards have tried getting Beal a legitimate sidekick to compete with him ever since the departure of John Wall, but the Russell Westbrook season only lasted 1 year, and together they were an 8 seed, and now the team has Kristaps Porzingis, but he was just chased out of town in Dallas for not being good enough to be a number 2 option on a team that wants to compete in the playoffs. The Wizards finished in 12th place in the Eastern Conference last season, but with the full-time additions of Kristaps Porzingis, along with Monte Morris and Will Barton now being in the fold, I would be lying if I said that the team hasn't improved, but I'm just not convinced that they've improved enough to actually be meaningful. The Eastern Conference is as loaded as it has been in a long time, and if the Wizards are still a team that's struggling to even make the play-in tournament, then there's a very real possibility that Bradley Beal's patience runs out and he requests a trade. The worst part of this is that the Wizards tied their own hands together by giving Beal a no-trade clause, so they would basically be forced to trade him to a team that he wants to go to, limiting their leverage in trade talks. But regardless, their future seems pretty capped in terms of how good they can actually be. The next team we'll be discussing today that I believe has a very real chance of blowing things up and going into a rebuild is the Portland Trail Blazers. Every year we discuss the possibility of Damian Lillard getting traded, and every year he reiterates how loyal he is to Portland, and the same song and dance is done time after time. But last season things actually did start to change on that front significantly when the Trailblazers traded away CJ McCollum. McCollum had been Lillard's right-hand man for years, and when he got sent to New Orleans, the notion of a rebuild got brought back up, only for the Blazers to insist that they're still trying to build around Lillard and compete for a championship. This offseason, they're betting hard on the talent that they have just getting and staying healthy after an injury-riddled year last year, but they also did trade for Jeremy Grant, and they signed Gary Payton in free agency, which are admittedly pretty solid additions. They also drafted Shaedon Sharpe, who I think can be a big-time talent in the league in a few years, but that also plays into one of the biggest reasons why a rebuild could be coming on the horizon. A core of Damian Lillard, Jeremy Grant, Yusuf Nurkic, and Anthony Simons is more than likely not playoff caliber in the Western Conference, even if Damian Lillard gets back to his prior superstar form. And even that's not guaranteed, because last season Lillard was already showing signs of slowing down production-wise before he even got injured. The Blazers have some strong young talent in Simons and Sharpe to build from if they were to shift into a rebuild. Grant only has 1 year left on his contract anyway, and Nurkic is the kind of player that could easily be moved at the trade deadline. I know Damian Lillard loves it in Portland, but eventually the team will have to do what's best for its own future. The next team we'll be discussing that I believe has a decent chance of blowing things up at some point this year is the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets had themselves quite the roller coaster of an offseason. It started with Kevin Durant requesting a trade, which then also led to a ton of Kyrie Irving trade rumors. The assumption by most was that both of them would find their way out of the team as teams began inquiring for them on the trade market, but then they both ended up recommitting to the Nets for the season, which many may think is the end of it, but I just don't believe that is the case. We can't just ignore that the team's two best players were unhappy with the state of the franchise a few months ago, and even though they're coming back and seem to be bought in for now, there's no guarantee that it lasts forever. Everything at the moment is pointing towards a really solid season for the Nets, with them coming back with a team that even made a few strong acquisitions in the offseason by getting Markieff Morris and Royce O'Neal, but we all thought the same thing last year, with them possibly being loaded, and then they ended up barely sneaking into the playoffs as a 7 seed and getting swept, so at this point they haven't earned the benefit of the doubt and need to prove themselves out on the court. If this season goes similarly to how last season went, where they didn't come close to reaching the expectations placed on them, then I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Nets go in a different direction. Kyrie Irving is on the last year of his contract anyway, and is likely going to leave after this season. Durant has already shown that he's willing to try to force a trade and could do it again, and the Nets are in desperate need of draft picks after giving them all away in the James Harden trade, so it's not as crazy as it may seem. And finally, the last team we'll be discussing today that could be on the verge of blowing it up is the Los Angeles Lakers. This selection is easily the one that's the most out there, but this whole team feels like a ticking time bomb. We know the pairing of LeBron James and Russell Westbrook is incredibly flawed out on the court. Anthony Davis hasn't had an elite season in 2 years. The team's supporting cast is arguably worse than it has ever been in the time that LeBron has been with the Lakers, and they just brought in Patrick Beverley, who has known beef with Russell Westbrook, so there's a lot going on here both on and off the court. The Lakers were like a worse version of the Nets last season, as they too came into the year hyped up as one of the best teams in the league, only to disappoint on a humongous scale, and this offseason, Russell Westbrook clearly wanted out, but the team couldn't find a trade partner to make it happen, so he's coming back. On top of all of this, LeBron James has been very open about how much he wants to play his final season with his son Bronny when he makes it to the NBA, which could happen in 2 years, so LeBron's sights are already seemingly set on the next chapter of his life instead of the present. The Lakers have a huge uphill battle to fight in order to get themselves back into contention, and just like with the Nets, if things play out similarly to how they went last season, then things could get ugly. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment down below which teams you think could blow it up and start over within the next year. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.